So I'm Paul Brown. I'm a geomatic surveyor and remote sensing scientist at Fera Science Limited. So I do everything from surveying landscapes and mapping landscapes to analysing imagery within that landscape. So using remote sensing, what is remote sensing? It is the science and the art of capturing spatial data within a landscape. We're all remote sensing at the moment, using our eyes at the sensors and detecting the reflected electromagnetic radiation. There's two forms of remote sensing. There's passive and active remote sensing, the major forms. Passive is when we're monitoring reflected light from the sun, and active is when the sensor is actually emitting electromagnetic signal and detecting the backscatter or the reflectance from that signal. So we basically just analyse that information after it's been captured. So when it comes to land management, my aspect as a surveying and remote sensor is to map the land and then attributes those different parcels of land. So what we tend to do is we use very high resolution satellite data, commercial satellite data that has a pixel of 30 centimetres, so each individual pixel is 30 by 30 centimetres. So we get very high resolution data and we can map very accurately across a landscape. We tend to use Ordnance Survey in the UK, Master Map product as a spatial framework. It helps with interoperability between different spatial systems if that is required, and it also adheres to the national mapping. We then enhance that mapping using the satellite data, so we map every single parcel in a landscape. So we go beyond the master map, mapping hedgerows, field margins, individual trees in fields, and then we attribute each one of those parcels with its habitat class and then look at its biodiversity units and then also its carbon sequestration capability.
I'm Naomi Jones and I'm an ecologist, and my main role at Fera, the focus of my work is to assess and understand more about habitat quality and condition, to understand how that affects biodiversity more widely, largely in the farmed environment. The farmed landscape is made up of lots and lots of very common habitats and features, and of course they're fundamental to supporting wider biodiversity. Biodiversity is important for agricultural system because an agricultural system is a complex and dynamic ecosystem, and biodiversity in a general sense can help maintain the resilience of those systems. But also, more specifically, biodiversity can be important in providing pest regulation or pollinator services to those systems. So where a farmer is going to establish a new habitat, it's really important to understand the underlying ecology. Say you're going to establish a wildflower margin. If you establish that in a position with a southerly aspect, there's much more chance of those plants establishing and flourishing, and therefore of supporting the beneficial invertebrate populations that you're interested in. So from a landscape perspective, it's really important that that feature that you're establishing is linked up to other features in the landscape, so that animals can move between features and ensure you have a viable population across the landscape as a whole. So my role at a general level is verification or ground truthing of what is identified through the remote sensing activity. So at the next level, it's important to understand about the condition of habitats and their value for wider biodiversity. And those assessments, looking at the quality of different habitats, you'll be assessing very different things, very different characteristics of those habitats, depending on what species might be using them and their value to wider biodiversity.